Hello everyone, welcome to Flooded Temples. Today we're going to take a look at the Temple of Luxor in Egypt and see if we can follow the path of the mining process that I think was happening there. If you assume that all the temples in the Luxor area of Egypt were flooded with water and connected together by the avenue of Sphinxes, then it would make sense that the mining process would start at the temples sitting at the highest elevation, and it would follow the path of the water as it makes its way through the temples. When you do a search, you'll find that the Luxor Temple is the highest temple of the four major temples that are all connected to it. So what I decided we'd do today is take this sketch that my lovely wife created for a book I wrote, and use it as a place marker for our journey as we make our way floating through the temples and then back down into the Nile River. In our boat you'll see we have Walter, the Egyptian guide, a pair of Japanese translators, and two dogu from Japan that are taking a tour of the Luxor mining facility during the off-season. A quick fun fact about modern-day Egypt for you guys is, still to this day, and for many years during the famous Opet festival that's held in Luxor, the Egyptians carry a boat along the Avenue of Sphinxes to celebrate the annual reunion of the Theban triad known as Amun, his wife Mut, and their son Khonsu, that these temples were named after. Please excuse the pronunciation. Okay now, before we go on our journey today, let's do a quick recap on my theory on how these Egyptian temples worked. And if you want a little more of a description, you can also go back and watch episodes 1 and 2. Basically, each temple is a water-filled acoustical waveguide with at least two obelisks that are positively charged by the oscillator in its sanctuary in order to attract lightning. Once the two obelisks are struck by lightning, they produce waves that interfere with each other to create cavitation in the water below. Sounds simple enough, right? Okay, so let's start our journey just outside the Temple of Luxor, where Google gives us an elevation of 292 feet above sea level. From here you can still see standing one of the biggest obelisks known to exist back in ancient Egypt. Just on the other side of the opening of the pylon wall on this quartz block stood another obelisk to match it, but it was unfortunately brought down in 1830 and taken to Paris. This is nothing but a guess, but I'm thinking that size did matter in ancient Egypt, and maybe the reason that the biggest obelisks were parked outside Luxor was because they needed to create the most powerful, prominent central maximum possible to make its way all the way down the Avenue of Sphinxes to the junction between the temples of Mut and Khonsu, 1.7 miles away. I also want to point out that it appears that the two giant statues between the obelisk and the pylon wall at the temple are positioned to stop the wave interference and another prominent central maximum from shooting back into the temple. In fact, if you ever manage to pay a visit here, you'll notice that there appears to be a lot of damage done to the statues and the blocks the obelisk sat on from the acoustical waves moving through the water. Another fun fact before we move on is the ancient word for obelisk back in the day was teknu. And teknu is also the word they used to describe a beating drum. Can you say oscillator? It seems like a bit of a coincidence to me. Anyways, let's continue our float downstream and see where it takes us. Oh no, look at this. We're at the crossroads. I wonder which way we should go. Well, let's zoom in and see what we can see. Oh, look at this. Appears to be a waveguide shooting waves towards us. Maybe to help push the mining process this way. Maybe if the waveguide known as the Temple of Khonsu shot its prominent central maximum down this avenue to Sphinxes and reflected it off of a wall, it would combine with the prominent central maximum from Luxor to create a new prominent central maximum pointing this way. At last, guys, no, I don't think that's right. I do think the waves coming from the Khonsu temple would reflect properly off the wall, but as we know from before, when the two waves meet here, they won't combine their vector sums and move this way like a particle would. Instead, the two waves will interfere with each other and keep moving in the same direction as they were originally going. So what's the purpose of these other two waveguides as the process works its way down from Luxor Temple to Karnak? My guess is either it's to continue to zap the materials in the water with as many prominent central maximums as possible as it works its way down what was the lazy river between Luxor and Karnak, or it was so that different materials could be introduced into the process at different temples along the way down. Anyways, as always, if you have any ideas about this, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. One simple way to guess which way the water will flow now is to zoom back into the Temple of Khonsu complex, and you can see that it's surrounded by giant walls without a suitable path for the water to flow out of. So if this is the case, we're going to assume that we should start rowing our boat this way. Maybe it's that way. Let's go. Here we are now in front of the Temple of Mut and working our way down towards the giant pylon gate that leads past the Temple of Amun's enclosure walls. Let's stop here for a second and take a look and see if we can see a little more about how these giant doors worked at these giant gates. One thing that is generally agreed upon by mainstream archaeologists and alternative archaeologists today is that there used to be some sort of ancient doors hung at these gates. If you've been following the supposed evolution of ancient Egyptian technology, you'll know what tube drill holes are, and maybe of the controversy around them. But if not, here's a quick recap. A famous Egyptologist named Flinders Petrie, who first measured the cores of one of these temple tube drill holes, realized that they must have been drilled out using a tool with teeth because of the spiraling teeth marks left behind on the core. Mainstream archaeology then put out a video to discredit the idea, using a tool with no teeth and some hard sand to show another method of making the holes. But they ignore the fact that their core shows no spiraling teeth marks once the process is complete. Scientists, most notably probably Christopher Dunn, have again and again tried to bring this simple and yet strong physical evidence back into the conversation, but are met with nothing but ridicule. In my opinion, these tube drill marks and the other straight saw blade marks cut into the extremely hard quartz stones in Egypt are the smoking gun that should allow people to be able to imagine that maybe there was a lost civilization of ancient people with advanced technologies that used to exist here earlier. One other thing about these tube drills that I can't wrap my head around is, how is it that the tube used starts off cutting a hole of a larger diameter at the start of the core and then shrinks down to a smaller diameter at the bottom? How did they get the tool off after? And what kind of tool is hard enough to cut through quartz, but it's flexible enough to change its shape? Anyways, if you have any ideas, please leave them in the comments below. Let's go back and look at these gates. When I searched to see the location of the drill holes in the gates to see how the doors might have been hung, I realized that they were drilled against the outside seal of the gates. This seems like it would be a strong design to keep water in or even to keep Romans out. But the thing I don't understand is, why would you make your gates so tall compared to the complex walls? Could it be so that there would be room for something to float underneath it? My assumption is that these doors were to keep water in during part of the mining process, and they were opened, allowing slow-moving current into the temple. Then at other times they needed to be closed, stopping the water from flowing back to Luxor, if the inlet from the Nile needed to be shut off up there. Let's keep moving into the temple. It's pretty easy to see at this point that as we move past the 9th, 8th, and 7th pylons, the water is going to take a left and want to flow back into the Nile River. So if that's the case, then what are these portions around and to the back the sanctuary used for? Well, many scholars have claimed that the Temple of Amun-Re was compared to a beating heart due to its central role in the ancient Egyptians' religious life. But I think it could possibly have to do with these portions of the temple. If you look here and here, you'll see that there were two obelisks tucked in behind these thick walls. There is a window higher up that leads to the obelisk, so the waves from the RPG in the sanctuary can positively charge them. But when they get hit by lightning, the thick walls block the waves from moving inwards, and they are only allowed to shoot out towards the outside, then towards the back of the temple. Which reminds me a little bit of a beating heart. What about you? Let's switch gears for a second and take a look at the ancient artifact that my wife sketched for me for my book called The Heart of Karnak and Wave of Luxor. To the left of JT and Sanvi, who are having a romantic moment, you'll see what's called the false doors. There have been many false doors found in different ancient sites around Egypt, and I've always wondered what they're for. Mainstream thinking is that they're portals or gateways between the worlds of the living and the dead. Sounds a little woo-woo to me. I think these false doors are maybe actually dream catchers. No, sorry, I mean wave catchers. I always thought they looked suspiciously similar to the acoustical dampening insulation that you see on music studio walls or inside anechoic chambers. These false doors are located along the east wall of the Karnak complex in what's called the Temple of Osiris at Karnak. And if you go into the entrance, you'll find it cut into the wall just to the left. Maybe it was meant to catch unwanted waves that were circulating around the walls of the complex to snub them out. I don't know. Does unwanted circulating wave walls sound woo-woo to you? Again, please leave your ideas in the comments below. Okay guys, I think that's it for today. Next time on Flooded Temples, like I promised earlier, we're going to try and get to the bottom of how they may have tuned and calibrated these beautiful temples. I didn't go into too much detail about it before, but the temperature of the water would have been a very important factor in making this whole process work. And as you can imagine, the time of day would have an effect on the temperature, but not only that, the process of cavitating water creates excess heat that would need to be dealt with. And after that, in future episodes, we're going to go to India and look at the Ellora caves, and see if we can see if some of the ancient tech in Egypt is also found there. Thanks again for watching. All the best.